Welcome to the show, the Jerry Ratcliffe Show. I'm Chris Graham, joined by the Hall of Famer Jerry Ratcliffe, and we've got some fresh news to get into with a lot of stuff this week in UVA sports news. But we got to start with news release from UVA Athletics today about Jay Woolfolk. Not surprising news, honestly, Jerry. At least for me, I've sort of been prognosticating this for months, and probably not the only one to do so. But Jay Woolfolk announcing that he will no longer be part of the UVA football program, going to focus on baseball as he gets ready for his junior year in baseball. And he's a top prospect for the 2024 Major League Draft. But this really puts the UVA football program in a bit of a bind.
Yeah, you're right, Chris. I agree. I wasn't really caught off guard by that either. In fact, when we were over at the George Walsh indoor facility this morning, talking to a few of the players who had transferred late into the program for some future stories, and sports information director, media relations director, I guess they call it these days, Jim Davis, told us there was some news coming. I kind of thought that might be what it was, that Jay Woolfolk was leaving the football program to focus on baseball. And I talked to a major league scout back a few months ago, and we were talking about Woolfolk, and he said his future is definitely in baseball with the kind of arm he has, speed, and even though he didn't have a great year this year by his expectations, he still was pretty good. He's pitching for the USA national team as we speak. He started the other night. I don't know if he ended up with them. I think they lost the game, but I'm not sure he got the loss. But yeah, it does leave Tony Elliott in a bit of a bind, because as we discussed last week, had Jay come in and not won the job in training camp, but you still have a backup there with a couple of years of experience in the Virginia, in college football, and over a year's experience in Virginia's offense that Tony Elliott and Des Kitchens installed. So they're kind of in a bind for whoever's going to be the backup, because I'm sure that Tony Musket is definitely penciled in as a starter. I'm not sure he has even very much competition for the starting job at this point.
Yeah, on the football side of this, Jay would have competed. I think his lack of availability, he was part of spring practice, but he was on a pitch count, as Tony Elliott and Des Kitchens like to call it, in terms of his throws in spring practice. But he was there for a lot of work in terms of learning more about the offense. He was there for what they call mental reps, getting the play call for a quarterback, standing behind the line of scrimmage, kind of, reading the defense, going through the progressions, just like he was in the game, just not throwing the ball himself, or in the drill, but just not throwing the ball. And so he did get a lot of work in the spring with the football team. He would have been competing for that starting job. He probably wouldn't have gotten it, but he would have been the backup, and he would have gotten a lot of time. Probably it had been told to me back in the spring that, they would have figured out some ways to get him on the field in other capacities, maybe in wildcat situations, that kind of thing. And now for Virginia at the quarterback position, you've got Tony Musket, but then behind him, most likely the guy who got the bulk of the snaps, in fact, all the snaps on the other side in the spring game, was a true freshman, Anthony Calandria, who was not going to be really competing for the starting job with Woolfolk in camp. But now that Woolfolk's not in camp, he's got to be ready to be the number two. And if you're not competing for the starting job, when those other two guys are competing for the starting job, you're expecting that the guy who loses that battle becomes a number two quarterback. Now, Calandria, all of a sudden, true freshman, is going to be your number two. You have to presume. There's a few guys behind him who were not in the running to even be the number three guy. Now, all of a sudden, have to be, sort of competing for that position as well. So, quarterback goes from a position that wasn't necessarily of strength before. It's definitely not a position of strength now, and you have to wonder what that does for the play calling I don't know if you're Tony Elliott and Des Kitchens, you cannot afford to have Tony Muskett get hurt at any point in a game or any point this season, with your backup being a true freshman. No matter how good Calandria looked in the spring game, I don't know if you can feel confident going in with him as your solid backup and then having to become a starter perhaps. And then behind Calandria, there's really not a lot. So, whoa, this is not good for UVA football.
I think that probably puts even more pressure on the running game to be successful, Chris, so that they don't have to run Muskett like they have their last two quarterbacks over the past 4 years, because that was the bulk of the ground game over that span of time. And so
even last year, Armstrong was a leading rusher for this team.
Yeah. And so I don't know if I don't necessarily think that was by design last year, like it was the previous three, but it's they're going to have to put together some kind of a running attack. Otherwise, people are just going to tee off and rush the heck out of Muskett and put him under a lot of pressure. So I think it's imperative they find some way to run the football. But I was looking at a list the other day on Twitter of somebody, I can't remember who it was now, had rated the 14 quarterbacks in the ACC and Virginia, and they did obviously weren't sure if Muskett or Woolfolk was going to start, but they just said Virginia quarterbacks, and they were rated 14th in the league. So we've seen a little bit of Muskett. We know he's had good numbers at Monmouth. We don't know what kind of a deep ball he throws because we haven't seen that much of it. I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on his shoulders. He seems well equipped for it. You talk to him, he's a very confident young man and believes that with his experience that he can deliver for Virginia. But, can he generate the kind of points it's going to take to win ball games? We talked about this at length in last week's podcast that, Virginia averaged 17 points a game, and you just can't win Power 5 football these days, or FCS football by scoring 17 points a game. You just can't do it. There's just too many offensive numbers out there that are flying around everywhere. You gotta put points on the board. You got to move the football, and they've got to find a way to do that. And it's going to be. I think that's what's going to make training camp very interesting to see. I don't know how much we'll get to see of it, but I think that's going to be something that everybody's going to be watching as to how this offense develops. If there's any new twists or turns in it, some wrinkles that they've put in since last year to try to put points on the board and move the chains.
What I'm about to say is not 2020 hindsight. I wrote back when Brennan Armstrong announced he was heading for the transfer portal that Tony Elliott would need to get out on the portal and find two quarterbacks off the portal. And that was when we were still presuming that Jay Woolfolk, who had been the backup for 2 years, would go in as the presumed favorite to be the starter. But just from a depth standpoint, you need guys, you need bodies, and because there was really nobody behind Woolfolk in the rotation. I know there's guys there. The SID will say there's 4 other quarterbacks there, but none of those guys are presumed to even be in the running for the number 3 spot. They'd have to be now. So now, and it's not like starting sometime during baseball season that it wasn't becoming somewhat obvious that Jay Woolfolk was not going to be around for next football season. I mean, even though he went through spring practice, once you start seeing his name pop up as a 2nd or 3rd round pick next year, you had to start thinking, man, maybe this doesn't add up for him to play football. So it's unconscionable that Tony Elliott didn't go out and find a second quarter. And then after spring, okay, so we'll give you January and February, but after the spring practice, there's a second portal period. How could he have not gone out then and tried to find another quarterback? I mean, come on. From a depth standpoint, Tony Muskett, if he'd been rated, Jerry, by that article as the number one quarterback in the ACC, from a depth standpoint, you need a backup that you can rely on. And nothing against Anthony Calandria, but he's a true freshman. God forbid he ends up being the starting quarterback this year. I think the kid's got a future at UVA, but I don't want that future to be this year. And so I can't believe they didn't go out and get another quarterback.
Yeah, and maybe they did go after one and just couldn't convince anybody to come here because, a lot of these guys might not have wanted to come to a team that went 3-7 last year and isn't predicted to do much better. So I know playing time is something a lot of these guys look for, but they also want to win. And, the projections aren't very good. So maybe he did go after some people that we don't know about and just couldn't land them, couldn't convince them to join the program. But
that doesn't say much for him either, does it?
well, no, not really. And that, but I agree. They really needed to bring in another guy just in case this happened. They had to have at least had an inkling that Woolfolk might be thinking this way because he had a pretty decent season, all things considered, and he's got a bright future, it appears. And the fact that he split time between the two programs kind of indicated that he might be thinking about going solely to baseball and giving up football. But you gotta get caught in a bind there by not bringing in yet another guy to somebody who could compete for the starting job if nothing else.
I think you're selling his numbers short. He had a 2.91 ERA this year.
Well, yeah, he had a good season.
Yeah, maybe
didn't
not
end well, but he and again, it didn't end well because, like Brian O'Connor told us during the College World Series, that Jay wasn't himself the last few weeks of the season, or at least the last couple of weeks of the season, because he had been dedicating a lot of time to football practice. So who knows?
and then he turns out not to play football. Because the game against Florida, he's standing out there in the bullpen in the 8th inning and 9th inning while Jake Berry's giving up all those bombs. And then he miraculously got better that week off after the College World Series, between that and then going to the USA Baseball Collegiate National Team, including his time in the intra-squad games where guys were trying to make the team. And then they actually wrapped that 2-week period up. They played Japan and Chinese Taipei in a pair of series. He pitched in 6 games through 6 2/3 innings, gave up 1 run, 1.35 ERA, 8 strikeouts, 2 walks, and 6 2/3 innings. Pretty good numbers for Woolfolk there with against some really good opposition.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, you're not a scrub if you make that national team. They go with guys that they believe in and people who they think have a bright future in the game. So I thought that spoke volumes about his potential when he got selected for that team. It's a true honor to represent your country, and then to be able to deliver like that, like you said, some great numbers there. He's got a bright future, I think, in baseball. I'm not so sure that would have been the case had he selected to stay split between football and baseball. Not many guys can pull that off. In fact, in my time covering at Virginia Athletics, and even before my time, I think there's only 2 guys that played football and baseball, and that was Mike Cubbage back in the early 70s before me here. And he was able to pull it off. He was a starting quarterback for some time and was offered some football scholarships out of high school. So to be a quarterback, and then obviously he had a great Major League Baseball career. And I was reminded that Simeon Willis did that, I guess, his final year, or maybe it was his 5th year of eligibility, that he, after playing football here at quarterback, that he played baseball. I can't remember. I don't know that he had an outstanding year that one season, but anyways, it's a rare feat for anybody to do that. I know a few guys did it in football and basketball back in the Terry Holland, Jeff Jones days, including Terry Kirby and I think Mark Cook.
Matt Blunden.
Matt Blunden was very good. He was probably the most successful.
Yeah, he was a rotation guy for basketball and starting quarterback his last year in football.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kirby didn't get much run in basketball. He had a couple of games where he was good, but Blunden was a regular contributor in basketball.
Yeah, Blunden was solid.
Yeah,
I remember. I think it was the Sugar Bowl, maybe. That he played, and then I remember flying back and driving with someone over to Marshall for a basketball game that I don't think they started in, but he flew in and separately from the team. I guess he was flying back from New Orleans so he could play in that basketball game. So yeah, he did it well. Not many people can pull off two sports in college, that's for sure.
And you mentioned Simeon Willis after his football career. And then there was another guy that I remember, Anthony Martinez. I don't know if you remember Anthony Martinez. He was a top recruit in the Grow era, played quarterback. They kind of ruined him, had him start a game down at South Carolina. He threw a 99-yard interception return in that game. He kind of lost his confidence. He ended up playing baseball, I want to say, for 2 or 3 years, but it was after football. So it wasn't like he was doing it at the same time.
I forgot about him, yeah.
Yeah, but so he's a different one too, because he wasn't doing it at the same time. And even all fairness to Mike Kovich, back in the 70s, baseball and football at the college level were different than they are now in terms of the demands on time for both individual sports. And so, yeah, for Woolfolk, it was, it did impact his season. It impacted the UVA baseball season, just not having him available. Your closer not available in the College World Series in a game you took a team, you had a team down in the ninth inning 5-3 that ended up going to the championship series, and you couldn't put them away because you didn't have your closer available. That does stand out. But Jay's future is in baseball. He will be I'm seeing a lot of second, third round pick projections for him, top 100, top 150 prospect for next year. So and with seeing guys like Kyle Teal and Jake Geloff both going early this year. Connolly Early went in the 5th round. Zach Geloff, who was picked a couple of years ago, is about to debut this weekend for the Oakland A's. Andrew Abbott. There's 7 guys from the 2021 draft class that have already reached the major leagues. 2 of them are Brian O'Connor guys, Andrew Abbott and Zach Geloff. So, yeah, I mean, my fear for Woolfolk was he'd get out there, maybe be in a Wildcat play call or catch a pass on some trick play or something like that, end up hurting his shoulder, and then boom, there goes the golden shoulder.
Yeah, that's a heck of a risk.
It's a risk. Yeah.
Got that kind of money possibly on the line down the road.
Yeah, and we've seen guys, and we've talked about Anthony Poindexter, guys get hurt on the football field and have their lifetime earnings impacted by that. So no, this is big news, and it's big news that affects football particularly right now. For baseball, it just means they get Jay's full attention in the fall and next spring. But for football, it definitely puts Tony Elliott even more so behind the 8 ball as far as his offense goes. So let's see. So switching gears, I guess we've kind of talked about and maybe stay with baseball just for a minute, Jerry. We talked about the draft picks, 4 guys and then a 5th, a recruit taken in the draft this year. Kyle Teal, 1st round, 14th pick, Boston. Jake Geloff, surprised to me that he went as late as he did, 60th pick, late 2nd round, LA Dodgers. Great situation for him though, as far as that goes. Both guys actually falling a bit, but great situations for them. Connolly Early, 5th round, Boston Red Sox. And Ethan O'Donnell, I think he was 5th round also, but I can't think of which team he ended up going to. Jerry, do you have it off the top of your head?
I'm trying to remember. I don't have it off the top of my head.
I'll reference it here real quick on one of our stories, but let's see. because let's see, and Johnny Farmello is the recruit that was taken a little bit ahead of projection. He actually went late first round to the Seattle Mariners. He's a high school center fielder from Northern Virginia that really came on late and ended up being taken in the first round. You have to imagine O'Donnell went to the Cincinnati Reds, so he'll join the farm system of Andrew Abbott, who's now at the big level. But yeah, Farmello, you have to imagine. I saw his signing bonus slot is $2.8 million. There's still room for wiggle, not a lot, but he could gamble on himself and think he could be a top 10 pick and double that. But it's hard to imagine a kid turning down $2.8 million coming out of high school. So impacts there. We kind of obviously knew Teal and Geloff were headed out, so probably O'Donnell as well. I was a little surprised to see early drafted in the 5th round. Good for him, obviously great situation for him, and then Farmello. So impacts. I mean, it's comes with the territory when you're a baseball coach that you can lose some guys to the MLB draft.
Yeah, it won't be the first time that's happened to Virginia and Farmello. Yeah, you're right. 2.8 million. That's a lot of money to turn down. It's a risk if you decide, hey, I'll go to college and see if I can improve my status between now and my junior year or whatever. And you just don't know. You don't know. It could go up, it could stay the same, or it could diminish.
Yeah.
And I know, they have the NIL stuff going on now to where guys can get paid to stay in school or go to school and have spending money and maybe more depending on your deal. But I'd be shocked if he turns down 2.8. And you can always come back and go to college and get your education. So not many people get an offer like that coming out of high school, for sure.
It's still about $2 million after taxes. You could put a lot of that away and take care of yourself for the rest of your life, and then just worry about playing baseball. Yeah, that's gonna be a hard one. So, but great news for those guys heading off, I'm sure soon to their destinations. I've already done an analysis on Teal. I plan to do kind of how they fit into their organization looks for all 4 of the guys who've gotten picked. But for Teal, there's not a lot ahead of him in Boston at catcher. There's 2 guys in their top 30 prospects list that, one guy's a AA, one guy's at low A. Their major league catcher is a 3rd-year guy hitting about 230. So Teal has a pretty clear path. If he performs, stays healthy, he could be in the big leagues in a couple of years, kind of like Andrew Abbott. So we'll see how things work out for those other guys. But Teal, again, falling. He was projected as high as number 3 that I saw. I think someone said maybe number 2 in the draft. But falling to Boston, man, there's worse things than that. Going to a successful organization where you have a rather clear path to getting to the big leagues in short order.
Yeah, I think he went that late because some of the teams that were drafting earlier than that just weren't shopping for a catcher. And so I think he's got a lot of opportunity there because he's a hard-hitting guy with some power. And if you, like you said, if the other guy's hitting 230, Teal projects to be better than that. And you're not going to find a guy that has any more endurance than he does. I mean, he never came out of games. He played every game, even against some of the Rena victims that Virginia played. I mean, he was there, and you just don't see that even in college baseball. Somebody that just works that hard and is so tireless and never comes out. I mean, he's definitely got big league written all over him. And it was ironic, I guess, that Geloff was picked number 60, the exact same spot that his brother Zach was picked a couple of years ago. And he just got called up to the big Oakland A's. And so pretty nice week for the Geloff family.
Indeed. Yeah. Both being the 60th pick. Yeah. I think that puts pressure now on Jake to get up to the bigs in a couple of years. You talked about Teal and playing. He played all 65 games this year. I think he may have come out for an inning or two, literally. I think I saw that stat somewhere where he played all but just a couple innings this year. And to put in perspective what that means as a catcher, I used to broadcast games on ESPN Plus. I did VMI baseball for several years, and we would broadcast 3-game weekend series, 5 or 6 series a year, and by Sunday, you're when you're just announcing the games, you're tired. It's like, hey, we did Friday night, we did Saturday night, afternoon or night, and Sunday during the day, and a catcher's back there, they're receiving anywhere 120, 130, 140 pitches in a game. They're back there, they're crouching, they're squatting on every one of those plays. It grinds by Sunday, let the guy DH, you're thinking to yourself, just let the guy DH and, get his bat in the lineup and let somebody else catch. But that says a lot about Kyle, that he played all of those games this year. And it's not as easy as anybody would want it to sound. It's not no offense to other players on the baseball team, but it's not standing in the outfield. It's not standing, on the infield. You're working really hard for those 3 hours you're in a game, and doing so, and baseball being pretty much a daily game. It's a grind, and for him to grind that out the way he did is impressive. And I found a quote. Brian O'Connor talked to NESN, North New England Sports Network, about Kyle, and he's putting pressure on the young man. He compared him to. He said that my comp for him is Buster Posey.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, that's a pretty nice comparison.
Yeah, Buster Posey is borderline Hall of Fame. Catchers tend to flame out a little bit sooner because of all those demands that they have to endure in their careers. And so his career was over at the age of 32, but you put his numbers up against anybody's as a catcher. And Buster Posey's, he'll be eligible for the Hall of Fame in 2026. It would not surprise me to see him be a Hall of Famer. Kyle, he's pretty much Buster Posey, according to Brian O'Connor. So we'll see how that works out. But hey, he's a great hitter. He also, one thing that you maybe don't see, he threw out 16 of 25 would-be base stealers this year. That number 25 is awfully low, probably because the 16 number out of 25 is awfully high. He pretty much knew not to run on the guy. So
yeah,
not only did he get over 400, but he's great behind the plate.
Yeah, I mean, as catcher, you're pretty much the quarterback or the point guard of your team, and you're calling the game. You're really in charge, and that's something not to be taken lightly either. And just the fact that you're out there day after day, game after game, and that's physically demanding to be in that catcher position, squatting down for 3 or 4 hours every game, every night. And hats off to him. And he was one of the guys in the Buster Posey, fighting for the Buster Posey trophy for the National Catcher of the Year. So who better to compare you to in that regard?
That's right. Well, we have a lot of we have a lot of basketball news, men's basketball news.
Yeah,
And, a lot of recruiting news, but let's start with the coaching news. The NCAA voting earlier this year to allow several sports, including men's basketball, to add to the number of full-time assistants. So there were 2 new positions opened up that could go full-time starting July 1st, and probably not a surprise. 2 guys being elevated from sort of internal promotion kind of situations by Tony Bennett to full-time jobs on his staff.
Yeah, Johnny Carpenter, who's been there for 9 years in a role of developmental coach, does a lot of research, recruiting, scouting, etc. Player development, is one of the guys that got elevated to full-time assistant. And Isaiah Wilkins, who Virginia fans fell in love with during his time here as a player, and has been back as a part-time guy role for the last 2 years, also doing the same thing as Johnny, both elevated into full-time roles, and which I think means they can go out on the road recruiting. I guess I don't know if I saw that in the information they put out, but I would assume if you're a full-time assistant, you're allowed to go out and on the road and recruit now. I'll have to double check on that, but which would probably be a good thing because there's so much strain on these coaches now, with all the national EYBL, AAU tournaments all across the country. They're trying to get eyes on so many recruits, and that's got to really put a strain on coaches to go out and try to evaluate all these high school kids, and not to mention going over film and stuff, trying to find out who they want on their team from the transfer portal and all that stuff. And they're not just looking at current recruits, they're looking at future recruits, 2 or 3 classes down the road. So they're seeing a lot of players. So I hope for their sake that they're allowed to go out and do that. But 2 strong, I don't know if you can really say additions because they were there in the first place, but additional roles on Virginia's team. And I'm not a bit surprised that Tony Bennett elevated those 2 guys, and pretty darn good coaching staff, I would say, Chris, with getting Ron Sanchez back in the fold after having been a head coach at Charlotte the last 5 years, having success down there with the 49ers, and then obviously Jason Williford and Orlando Vandross, who's carving out a nice name as a recruiter as well. And these 2 guys now, there's not much room on that first row of the bench. There's so many coaches in college basketball now. I don't know if they'll get a front row seat or still have to sit in the back row.
May have to draw straws or something before each game. Figure out who sits there with
seniority. Maybe they may still be at either the end of the bench or on the back row.
There you go. Hey, and one other guy added too. Another Wahoo fan favorite, Chase Coleman, added as a grad assistant. Boy, you didn't see that coming, did you? He was pretty much a coach the last couple of years as it was.
Yeah, he really was. They like to describe him as a coach on the floor, and certainly he knows the game. And sounds like a nice career path for him because was really into it, and was a really smart guard who came on as a walk-on and earned a scholarship and got playing time in certain situations, not just garbage time, but some legitimate minutes over the last couple of seasons. So Tony likes to bring in grad assistants who have experience in his program and get their coaching career started and give them an opportunity to grow. And I'm sure Chase is extremely excited to be part of that staff.
I remember reading once that Chase had said, one of the reasons he wanted to go to the University of Virginia, in addition to it being a great school and the opportunity to walk on and try to walk on to the basketball program, was that he knows he wants to be a coach one day. His father, Cliff, is a JUCO coach, Bryant Stratton College down in Virginia Beach, had a 23-7 season this past year. And so he knew already, hey, I want to get into coaching, and who better to learn under than Tony Bennett, and all those other assistants that you've mentioned. And so now he gets to do that, work towards his grad degree. I loved in the press release how it was noted that both Johnny Carpenter and, of course, Isaiah, we know Isaiah played at Virginia, graduated in 2018. Also, as the last 2 years is working towards his master's degree. Johnny was a team manager back in his day, and he was the head team manager his final year, 2012, 2013. Then he got his first master's. Then he just finished up his MBA at Garden School. So, these are guys. These are serious guys. I mean, they got some chops. In addition to the basketball part of it, they got the other stuff going on too. So, pretty heady staff over there under Tony Bennett.
No question at all. And if you talk to Isaiah or Johnny, you know that they're really students of the game, and they know what they're doing. So I'm glad that they got their coaching starts here. So who knows, at some point, if some of the older guys move on or become head coaches elsewhere, they may be on the front row of the bench.
Yeah, also, so we talked about the coaching news, a lot of recruiting news, some offers going out for future classes.
Yeah, I mean, right now, as we mentioned last week, Christian Bliss is the only guy in the 2024 class that's coming in. But there are 8 offers on the table out there for the class of, well, actually, class of 23 for Bliss. The other 8 guys, class of 2024, 3 offers this week, Chris, and the latest is Derek Dixon, a 6'5" combo guard from Gonzaga High School in DC, part of that Catholic league up there, which is so tough, great basketball in that league. He's a 4-star, and he has an impressive list of offers from Villanova, Virginia Tech, Xavier, Syracuse, Kansas State, Pitt, Providence, George Mason, Maryland, Penn State. I don't know if I mentioned them or not. He's been ranked in the top 100 for his class in the nation at any position. So that's another top 100 guy Tony and his staff are going after. Rated as number 12 consensus combo guard in the country, and pretty much the number 2 overall prospect in the District of Columbia, which has some pretty good high school basketball. He's been described as a really solid on-ball defender, and I think there's a bunch of guards they've offered, but he was the only guard this week. He's actually in the class. I think he was in the class of 2025. Yeah, he's in the class of 2025, not 2024. There's been so many guys coming at us, I can't keep up with them. But we have a list at jerryratcliffe.com of all the guys offered in each class, 24 through 26. So you can go there and check that out. It's a really nice list that my son Scott puts together. A guy from the class of 2024, Jacob Kofi, was the first guy offered this week. He's only 17 years old, and he's 6'9", 225, power forward. He plays out in Washington, state of Washington, in the Seattle area for East Side Catholic, and I think he was in Massachusetts before he moved out to Washington. He's ranked in the top 100 by a couple of recruiting services, and ranked anywhere from 12 to 31 is in the power forward category for that class, and the number 1 or number 2 overall prospect in the state of Washington. He's kind of come on during the EYBL season, and he only averaged 8 points, I think, during his last season, but he had other really good numbers like 13 rebounds, high field goal percentage, not a great free throw percentage, but he's a kid that even though he's got a good body for a power forward at his age, 17, it looks like he might have to add some strength sometime between now and college ball. But he is one of the most coveted players by all the Pac-12 schools in terms of being well, not just a power forward, but he's been described as an elite face-up shooter. So, and he has field goal percentage to back that up. He's already had official visits to Oregon and Washington, and plans to go see Southern Cal and maybe Gonzaga. So Virginia would like to get a visit out of him so they can show him what it's like here on the East Coast. He did. We're talking about how some of these guys have really caught coaches' eyes in these evaluation period tournaments and stuff. In a July 4th game in the EYBL, he had a 14-point, 12 rebound, 2 block game and a win, and shot 58%, 7 of 12. and in another game he had 25 and 7. So I think they like what they see in him and what he might could potentially bring to the table. They offered another power forward the same day, Chris, a kid from Texas, David Punch, 6'7", 205 from Harker Heights. I think that's outside Dallas. I'm not sure, but 247 Sports ranks him in the top 100. I think 88 nationally overall, 39 ranking as a power forward by one service, 51 by another, and either 9 or 13 overall prospects in the state of Texas. He has a decent list of suitors as well. He's not quite as much as Kofi, but he's a kid who apparently came on really strong during the EYBL evaluation period as well. It's been offered by UVA, Virginia Tech, VCU, San Francisco, Penn State, Oral Roberts, New Mexico, Xavier, and a handful of other schools, New Mexico State, some of those. He's a guy that scores around and above the rim. He plays through contact, which is something that Jason Wilford likes, I know, in his big men. He has long arms, big hands. He can shoot the three. He can face up and attack. And has some nice moves, inside moves. So he, in one of those, in the Georgia, not Georgia, but in the Texas 6A playoffs, in a win where his team scored 59 points, he had 30 of them to go along with 17 rebounds. So along with 4 blocks and 3 dunks, and it was diving on the floor, made 8 out of 9 field goals. Assume he got a few free throws in there too, but 3 pretty solid offers for recruits there, Chris. And like I said, they have 3, 4, 5, 7 or 8 guys offered in the class of 24, 3 in the class of 25. Dixon is one of those, and including Chance Mallory from Charlottesville that we talked about recently, and one from the class of 2026, the 6'8" Latrell Allman kid that we talked about from Richmond, Virginia. So, and I guess we should also mention that Con Canoopel, the guy who led the EYBL in scoring nationally this past season, Virginia was in early on him, and they're still in the mix with him, but Duke and Alabama have gotten involved with him as well, and he has visits set up at both schools. He's already visited Virginia, and so keep our eye out on that recruitment as we go as well. So I think that kind of rounds up the recruiting for this week, but coaches are pretty active trying to build this team for the future, Chris.
And I'll throw one more thing out to you. You had a really interesting scatter shooting yesterday, Wednesday, as we're recording, with a few tidbits, basketball and football tidbits, particularly.
Yeah, Bliss, who committed to Virginia last week over some pretty good schools, as the I guess the point guard of the future, 6'4", 205, pretty much a 4-star, and played in the Peach Jam down in North Augusta for a week, played 6 games, averaged around 15 points, was named to the 10-man first team Peach Jam tournament squad. A lot of teams in that mix, so, and a lot of great players. So to make the 10-man first team, it's a pretty good honor. I talked to him. I think we're going to have him on a podcast perhaps next week. He was trying this week, but some of these kids have so many games and stuff going on. It's hard for them to schedule anything, but one of a couple of big time people we're going to have on our podcast next week. And the Hodge kid, Matthew Hodge, whose dad, Odell, was a star at Old Dominion back in the 90s, played against Jason Williford. He also played in that tournament and did pretty well. He might have been an honorable mention, but he has scheduled a visit to Virginia, I think in September, if I recall off the top of my head.
You say in your story September 21st.
Yeah, 21st. So a little bit of news on those two kids who one is a future Wahoo, the other one could be. Hodge is like I said, a 6'8" power forward from New Jersey and originally from Belgium. I think his mom lives in Belgium. I guess he came over to the United States to play high school ball and seek a college home. So Virginia's all over the map, Chris.
I see one of the other mini tidbits, and I just recommend the listeners and viewers out there to go to the scattered shooting column on the website on jerryratcliffe.com. JMU announced it has sold out all of its home season tickets this year. That says 8,718 is their number of home season tickets. I'm guessing there's going to be more than 8,718 JMU fans in Scott Stadium on that second Saturday in September.
Yeah, I would think so. They support their program pretty well, and it's a short trip, and I'm sure expectations are high. Although they beat some pretty good teams last year.
They did. Yeah,
they got a lot of people coming back. I did see in the Lindy's preseason magazine that they are actually ranked below Virginia in the expectations. I guess I think they were 78 or something like that.
You got Virginia 76 according to Lindy's and JMU 98. I'm surprised.
98, yeah, 98. That's right.
They did lose their quarterback. They had a pretty good, a good numbers quarterback last year, so that might be part of their issue going into this season.
Yeah, it could very well be. And so I got too many numbers rattling around in my head.
Boy, and I'm just now seeing this one, Jerry, so the Northwestern situation, everybody who's listening to this, I'm sure knows what's going on with Northwestern football. A name that we're pretty familiar with being mentioned as a possible candidate there.
Yeah, well, what it's like. You've been part of many coaching searches, as have I. And so when a coach gets fired, people start throwing out every name in the book of somebody who might be available or might not even be available. In this case, after Pat Fitzgerald was fired up at Northwestern in that scandal this past week, like you said, a familiar name, Bronco Mendenhall's name surfaced as a potential candidate for the job. I don't know how serious that is, but we'll keep our eye on it. Certainly Bronco late last year decided that he would like to get back into college coaching. And even though there were a lot of openings in the offseason, I don't know if I never heard or read if he interviewed for any of those vacancies, Chris, but apparently he's serious about getting back into the game again. So it'll be interesting to follow that and see if anything develops there. I would like to see him get back into coaching. I think Bronco's a good coach. Does things a little differently, but always had a good relationship with him. And I think college football needs some guys with character like Bronco has and a good football mind. So I wish him well. I hope he lands a job somewhere in the not too distant future. If you're out of it for a while in college coaching, it's hard to get back in.
What was he, 6 years at Virginia, a school that has rigorous academic requirements, and certainly that would get you ready for a job at Northwestern. And then, I don't know if anything can get you ready for having to take over in the wake of the scandal that's out there. There's actually a Virginia player on the roster, Malik Washington, transferred from Northwestern. Right. I tried to reach out to Virginia. I tried to reach out to him through Virginia Athletics. Not surprising. The word got back to me. He does not want to comment on that story.
I wouldn't either if I were.
But you do, it's kind of, I mean, obviously, I'm sure inquiring minds kind of want to know what he saw there. I mean, did that factor into his decision to want to transfer? He was their leading receiver last year, graduated from there. And so anyway, so there is a Virginia tie to that story, if you want to say. I guess as we're getting ready to wrap up, Jerry, we had a lot of news this week. Anything else on your mind as we're counting down the minutes here?
Yeah, a ton of stuff, Chris. It's pretty cool. My son Scott had a couple of nice interviews this week, thanks to Eric Bacher over at Sports Information with Jacob Groves. And he did a story for your site and a different story for my site. But Virginia fans should check out both sites and read the story. It's really interesting tale about his development and what he expects at Virginia and what Virginia expects from him. So I would encourage you to go and read that story along with all of our other stuff. We've got, like we said a few weeks ago, Chris, when we entered the summer, we wondered what we were going to talk about. Well, there's never a dull moment in the world of Wahoo sports these days. We've had a ton of content, as has Chris. And that's why we have our hour-long podcast each week, because there's plenty to talk about. It's amazing how it used to be in the summertime. You were dying for stuff to have to write about for content and to talk about. But these days, you're lucky if you can keep up with all of it. There's so much going on. But
imagine how long these podcasts are going to be when we actually have stuff to talk about, Jerry.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So he's going to have a couple of features on some new Virginia basketball players over the next few days, starting today. I went over to the George Welsh Indoor facility this morning, bright and early at 9 o'clock for they had 4 players available that transferred in late, I think. So I didn't have time to talk to all of them, but I talked to the 2 defensive backs, Malcolm Green and Sam, why am I
Westfall.
blanking?
Sam Westfall. Yeah.
SMU. Malcolm, of course, came in from Clemson and has a younger brother on the team. He'll be a freshman from Highland Springs. So had really good interviews with both those guys, very confident guys who have NFL aspirations and believe they can contribute to what could be a pretty darn good Virginia defense, Chris. I know last week we talked about, is there any reason to get excited about Virginia football? And while it's hard to find much on the offensive end, defense got like 8 returning starters, and then these 2 guys who have plenty of experience in good football programs, SMU and Clemson. I think both guys were banged up a little bit. It prevented them from maybe being where they wanted to be. But just talking to Malcolm, I said, if you hadn't had so many injury issues at Clemson, where do you think you'd be right now? And he said, I think I'd be in the NFL right now. So couple of good pickups by Tony Elliott's staff, and could be strong contributors to Virginia secondary that's going to need to replace a couple of guys that departed and who were really good. So, but anyway, lots of stuff coming. I think we've got some really good podcasts and some interesting guests. I won't give away who all of them are coming up in the next week or 2. But I think that's probably pretty much it, Chris, unless you got something on your mind. And if not, I'll just thank our sponsors.
I'll just say, for the football, run the ball. We got a good punter. Punt the ball well, pin them down, play defense. That's the game plan. There we go.
Right. That might be one way you can win by scoring 17 points.
That's the only way we can win by scoring 17 points. Yeah. But the defense should be really good. I'm glad to hear that you had a chance to talk with some of those guys, and look forward to, the more the pressure's on them, they're going to have to really step up, but I bet they will.
Yeah, I think John Rudzinski is a real quality coach. I think they got lucky in landing him as defensive coordinator. I wouldn't be surprised to see him if he has another good year. He might end up being a head coach somewhere. If you can coach defense like that for a couple of years in Power 5 football, there's a market for guys who can do that.
He
There's
turned
no-
around that defense that was that bad 2 years ago, and in 1 year he had them playing great football. Yeah, he's not long, unfortunately, for Virginia, but he's doing us well for the time being.
Yeah, absolutely. Otherwise, I'd like to thank our podcast sponsors and also remind you we're getting a lot of nice numbers with our podcasts. And as Chris said last week, if you can't find us on any of your favorite podcast platforms, let him know and he will be glad to put it there. But I think we're on just about all of them. And we're also on YouTube, so you can view our podcast there. But couldn't do it without our sponsors. Roback got to show off the logo of the dog. You can see it there. Local sportswear company born in Charlottesville, backed by UVA people and their NIL contributors and Wahoo people. So if you're going to go out and buy nice clothing, give Roback a chance. Look at their ads on our website and click on the link, get a nice discount. I know many of you have, and we appreciate it, and Roback appreciates it. They've got so many designs on their shirts that you can use to play golf or tennis or wear out for a nice dinner or evening. And they're very comfortable, lightweight. And they have a women's line with some really good stuff. They have shorts, hoodies, Q-zips, you name it. They've got it all. So check them out. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised with what you find. And the Aberdeen Barn, Virginia's finest steakhouse, makes my mouth water every time I think about it. Great atmosphere, great food, great service, conveniently located on 29. They're at the intersection of 29 and 250 pretty much. And you never know who you're going to see in there. There's every Wahoo that's ever come around has used that as one of their favorite dining places. And recruits, coaches, players, past players, you name it. I'll never forget a dinner there I had once, Chris, with Joe Palumbo, Tom Scott, guys are in the College Football Hall of Fame. George Welsh was there. Just on and on. Incredible place. But check them out. Go by and tell them that Hootie sent you and Chris sent you. And also the Good Feet store. Jonathan Cotton, who grew up in Crozet, is a UVA fan, also a contributor, donor, NIL guy for Virginia. He's does a lot of events over there. One of the fastest growing companies in the United States, particularly all over the Mid-Atlantic. They design special arches for your feet to make it more comfortable to walk and run. They do it just for your foot, which is pretty cool. I'm a customer and I can vouch for that. But Jonathan's everywhere, man. I see him on Twitter. He is just, the guy is everywhere. He knows everybody. They just opened up a store in Bristol. I think they're opening up one in Wilmington, North Carolina. I saw him foot racing against one of the Virginia football players this week, and he didn't lose too badly. It was a sprint, but Jonathan's not exactly a spring chicken, and even though he got beat by several lengths, he held his own, and I teased him about it a little bit. He laughed, but he's a great guy, and you love supporting people who have their heart in the right place, and he certainly does. He loves Virginia athletes and tries to support them. So support him and his great company. Thanks to all those folks, and we're looking for more sponsors out there. So if you'd like to sponsor our podcast or our website or both, just get a hold of us and we'll come and see you and talk about it.
That's right. You can always use extra sponsorship, help make these podcasts and videos and the websites possible. So thanks to all you readers and listeners and viewers out there. Go to jerryratcliffe.com, go to augustafreepress.com for more on Virginia sports. For Jerry Ratcliffe, the Hall of Famer, I'm Chris Graham signing off. Everyone have a great week.